Okay, you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org. We're on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by State Representative Jordan Harris as he previews his upcoming statewide education tour. Marcus McKnight, founder and member of the Philly Transit Riders Union, will discuss SEPTA's bus revolution with us. And Vanessa Marie Graber will be on to discuss with us the murder of Eddie Izziardi. Vanessa, how are you tonight?
Hey, Larry, glad to be on the show. I'm doing well.
Always glad to have you here. Often, much more often. And Denise Clay Murray is here. I've been told.
Hi, everybody.
There's Denise. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's going to be a good night because we have Vanessa with us. We have two very good conversations about incredibly pertinent issues tonight. So let's start with that. We're going to open with our discussion with State Representative Jordan Harris.
Okay, you are listening to Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5. And I am here with State Representative Jordan Harris, chair of the House Appropriations Committee. And we're going to talk about a tour of the state he is going on to talk about something that's really, really important and necessary, and we talk about a lot here in Philadelphia, education funding. Thanks a lot, Rep. Harris, for giving us the time.
Thanks, Denise, for having me. Always a pleasure to be with you.
So I guess my first question for you is, why are you doing this tour, and how many counties are you intending to hit as a part of it?
So, education, we all know is an extremely important part of our state's budget. But beyond that, I think what you do for the young people of your city, your county, or this Commonwealth, it really articulates your view on the future of your city, your county, or your Commonwealth. And that's a global perspective and not just a Pennsylvania-centric perspective. How a society treats their young people is indicative on the future that society will have, or the lack thereof. And the Commonwealth Court ruling, as you said, put into perspective and codified what many of us have believed for years, that the way we fund and the way we handle education in the Commonwealth is unconstitutional. So what this tour is going to do is take the legislature to the people and give us as legislators an opportunity to hear from our constituents across the Commonwealth, but also educational experts, both in Pennsylvania and across the nation, to talk to us about what the future of education should and could look like in Pennsylvania. Far too often, we talk in our own silos about what we think is best. And I think now is a pivotal moment for us to get beyond our own circle and to really deep dive into what a reimagined education system in Pennsylvania could look like.
Now, you're not doing this alone, correct? You're not going out on this tour alone.
No, so it's the House Appropriations Committee, which I chair, and the House Education Committee, which my colleague, Representative Pete Schweier from the Lehigh Valley, he chairs. We're going out and we're breaking. And here's the thing, Denise, this is not political in the sense that it is a actual committee hearing, which means that Democrats and Republican members of the committee will be invited to take part in these conversations. And the minority chairman of the committee will also have an opportunity to add a speaker to to the agenda. Listen, this is not a time to be adversarial when it comes to education, but it is a time to be visionary, inspirational, and aspirational when it comes to charting a new course of education in Pennsylvania. So we're going out collectively to really ask the tough questions about what education should look like in the Commonwealth.
So, what are you hoping to learn from people? Or because when we talk about education, particularly when it's lawsuits, we focus on places like Philadelphia, which of course, we're in Philadelphia, it kind of makes sense. But when I was a reporter in Reading, there were people in Berks County, like the Hamburg School District, Conrad Weiser, the Reading School District itself, that were joining on to lawsuits that places like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh were filing because of education funding and its inequities. So what are you hoping to hear from constituents around the Commonwealth as you take this tour?
So I have an idea of some of the things we'll hear, but the truth is, what we're really trying to do is to bring in experts from all over, and I legitimately mean that, from all over, that can help us recalibrate what education should look like in Pennsylvania. And let me be clear, this is not just a funding conversation. The last thing we need, Denise, if we're being honest, is to pour tons of money into the system and then sit back 10 years later with tens of billions of more dollars spent and get the same outcomes, right? Now is the pivotal time, in my view, because it's time for us to make significant investments in education. It's been time for us to do it, but now that we do have the resources to do it, the question isn't just about how we fund, but what we fund. What works? Ask yourself this question. What works to close the educational gap between our poorest students and our wealthy and affluent students? Is it just more money in their schools? Or is it different? Or is there a differentiation in how we teach those students? Is it a different level of courses? Are there different options? Are there different delivery methods? All of those questions should and need to be answered. What do you do with teacher shortages? What have other states done with teacher shortages? What do you do to diversify the teacher workforce? How do you get more Black males into the classroom? How do you get more Black females in the classroom? How do you get more Hispanic brothers and sisters into the classroom? How do you work on, a career to technical education? These are all questions that need to be answered, but shouldn't just be answered from what we think, but what does the data show? What places are doing it better than Pennsylvania? What places have had success in it? And what are they doing that we're not doing? That's what this tour is about, to gather all of that information, right? So that when we move forward, we're moving forward armed with information that can help us reimagine what education looks like in the Commonwealth.
Now, you're saying that in an atmosphere where Governor Shapiro tried to get vouchers on, as part of the budget. And you also, and here in Philadelphia, there's always a conflict when it comes to the addition of more charter schools as opposed to traditional schools. Are you concerned that, talking about, radically, taking a more radical look at Pennsylvania's education system is going to, I guess, cause the teachers who are already here to decide, I don't want to fool with this?
Yeah, I don't think it's radical for us to think that our children deserve more and that we should actually bring in people to talk to us about what that more looks like and what better looks like. I don't think that's radical at all. I think it's actually responsible. But more than that, we will take a direct look at everything from charter schools to cyber charters to EITC, OSTC, scholarships. All of the above will be a part of the conversations that we're having. But here's the thing. We have a mandate from the court to do better. And that's not to do better by a few, but to do better by all. And, so for me, it's time that we review everything and all of the tools in our educational toolbox to see what works, what doesn't work, what we could do better, what we could tweak. I mean, when it comes to charter schools, I mean, we have a charter law that's more than 20 years old. You can't tell me that there aren't things in the charter law that need to be updated. I mean, if you talk to any of our charter advocates, those who are in favor of charter schools, those who are against, they will all agree on one thing: we need to update the charter law, right? So now is the time to have the significant, much needed conversation that we are being mandated or given a mandate from the Commonwealth Court to have about what education in Pennsylvania looks like. And we cannot be afraid. We cannot be afraid to have the necessary conversations. Again, it's not the time to be adversarial, but it is the time to be visionary. And far too often we allow what could happen or who might be upset or who might get offended to stop us from doing the work that's necessary. But here's what I know. I know that I graduated from a Philadelphia school more than 20 years ago. And I know some of the problems that we had when I was in school are still persisting problems. But what I also know is that it's foolish of us to think that money alone will solve the issues of our system. We have to take a hard look at it all. We have to take a hard examination of it all, and then collectively work together to see what's in the best interest of our children. If we don't, we, the collective, we will now be responsible for the future of this Commonwealth.
Okay, now before I send you to my co-host, Larry McGlynn, could you tell our listeners what EITC and the OITC, I think you were talking about? Because you know, while I might know that, my listeners might not.
So in Pennsylvania, we have a system of tax credit programs where basically a business gets a credit against their state tax, but then they can direct those resources to educational institutions. So for some parents, they've used those tax dollars to send their kids to private schools. They've used those tax credits, I should say, to private schools. And it's different than a voucher in the sense that it's not direct money going to a parent to decide where to send their kids, but it's tax dollars, tax credit dollars that a company was going to pay to the state for their taxes that they're now repurposing for schools and given to young people to go to different schools. That is the whole premise of the EITC. Then the OSTC is more directed, and there are more financial restraints because that money is more directed to income base for families, so that money could go directly to students who are in struggling school districts, who attend struggling schools, and whose family have a financial need. So that is already what exists in Pennsylvania. We spend well over, I think actually close to $500 million in the tax credit programs that we have now. But here's the thing. We need to examine that. Is it working? Are the tax credit dollars going to the students that we want it to go to? Are the schools doing right by those students? You know, all of these are unanswered questions. And all I'm saying is it's time for us to sit down, get the answers so that we can chart the best course forward for all of our children.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to give you to my co-host, Larry McGlynn, and you are still listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
Thank you, Denise. And Representative Harris, thank you so much for joining us. Taking a broader view, you know, you're going around the state, you're talking to people. How do external factors, and I'm really talking about the corrosive impact of money in politics, affect the educational decisions at the state level, and how do you cut through that?
Courage. Here's the thing, you know, I think in my more than a decade in elected office, I've learned that if you've pissed off people on both sides of the issue, you probably hit the good sweet spot. You know, this is one of those contentious issues that people feel very passionate about. But in my view, a lot of times we forget about why we're talking about this in the first place, and that's children. I have a particular lived experience as a student in a Philadelphia school and going through Philadelphia schools, my educational career here in Philadelphia. I have a particular lived experience that I think gives me a view on why and how we should approach these conversations that might be different than others. My vested interest is in the students because I continue to live in the neighborhood that the young people that we're talking about are educated in. When I walk out, and this is not hyperbole, when I walk out of my door on a Monday morning or a Tuesday morning, I interact with with the young people that we're talking about, because 2 blocks away from me, there's a middle school and a high school, or the elementary school and a high school, literally 2 blocks away from my house. So when I leave my front step, I'm running into the young people that we're talking about. So I'm not removed from any of this. So for me, it's more than the external forces and more about the young people who live on my block, who walk up my streets, and understanding what we could do better to make sure that they get a quality education right here in the city.
Now, it sounds like part of the tour is to figure out what other people are doing, what we should be doing in terms of educating the students, what the actual program should be. But we do know we have a huge infrastructure problem throughout.
Mhm.
And some of the surplus money sitting in Harrisburg right now be dedicated to that. And is that something that can be done sooner than later?
So a part of the conversation is going to be around facilities and what to do with facilities. Because here's the thing, even that could be a contentious conversation, right? There are those who want to pump money into fixing up facilities. And there are others who want to tear down the facilities and rebuild and do differently. I mean, you can have a lot of differing opinions on the issue of facilities. I think we all agree that we need to spend money on facilities. I mean, think about it this way, Larry. Philadelphia, we have a building down here in South Philly that was built in the 1800s. Like, I'm not exaggerating. The building was built in the 1800s, and it is still being used to this day as a school to educate children, right? There's a need for facilities. I mean, just I think it was last week, schools were closing early because of the heat. Our schools aren't air conditioned, right? So we know we need to, have a plan for what we do with facilities. And it is not just the urban issue. There are rural parts of Pennsylvania that have the same infrastructure problems, and some of them have even worse infrastructure problems in rural Pennsylvania. So we have a particular part of the tour where we're going to focus on facilities and what we could do. But again, what I want to press upon people is that nobody should be offended. Nobody should be scared. Nobody should be nervous. We're literally talking about bringing in folks who could tell us how to do it. And that's not to say that we don't have educators who, no, it's going to be a combination. But I think we have to admit that there are other places that are doing a better job at certain aspects of the educational space. What is the harm in bringing those folks in to find out, particularly places that are similar to here? What are you doing that's different? What have you changed that we haven't changed? What could we be doing differently? And then taking those suggestions and seeing how we can incorporate those things into what we're doing. When you are only looking at it from the perspective of what you do and what you've been doing, I think you miss out on an opportunity to really and significantly address issues and make the necessary changes.
Do you think there is an appetite in Harrisburg to actually make some sort of meaningful change?
Absolutely. I think you have lots of folks who understand the significance of the moment that we're in. Now, I'm not naive to the slow nature by which some things happen in Harrisburg, but I can tell you I've had success in many other areas in the Capitol, moving pieces of legislation to the governor's desk that 10 years ago people told me we'd never be able to get done. So, a walk starts with a step. And I think it's time for us to take the steps in the right direction, to see what we collectively can agree to after hearing information. I think the other thing is, we make a lot of decisions in Harrisburg without a lot of input from average everyday people, and without hearing their voices and hearing people's lived experiences. I think this is a great opportunity to give people that kind of access, so that we all can move collectively together.
Well, thank you so much, Representative Harris. I'm going to hand you back over to Denise Murray. You're on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Yes, so thank you so much, Representative Harris. Now, when is the tour coming to Philadelphia, and how can people here sign up to either come to the committee hearing or testify? How do we connect?
So the tour will be in Philadelphia. So let me say this: we're going all over the state, and I mean that. We're going to start off in Western Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, and Aliquippa. We're going to the northeast part of the state. We'll be in Philly. We'll be in the surrounding counties around Philadelphia. I think we're going to do some stuff in central Pennsylvania as well. We're literally going all over the state to really dive in deep on what education looks like in Pennsylvania, and what we could do more of that we're doing well, and what we could change where we need to make improvements. We'll be in the city of Philadelphia. We can't not come to Philly. It's my hometown. But it also is the largest school district in the Commonwealth. It is a place that has a diversity of, kind of all of the things we're talking about in the educational toolbox. We'll be there. I believe the dates are October 24th and October 25th. We're spending 2 days in Philly. There are going to be all day occurrences from all of the different topics that we're going to be talking about. I think we're actually going to be touring some schools as well while we're here. We're so invested in this that we're also launching a new website that we're currently working on, that we'll be launching at the beginning of October, to give folks the opportunity, one, to sign up to testify when we get to that part, and to also share their views, their opinions, and their comments with the committee. So we're working on that website right now. So you can stay tuned to my social media sites, Rep Harris at Rep Harris on Twitter, Jordan A. Harris on Instagram, Rep Jordan Harris on Facebook. And we'll also, when we get that website up and running, we'll definitely share it with you so you can share it with your listeners. But we want folks to be engaged in this process. Like I said, this is not about walking alone, but this is really about us all walking together towards what quality education looks like for all of our children.
Okay, thanks a lot. This Representative Jordan Harris. He is the chair of the House Appropriations Committee. And keep an eye here on Hall Monitor for when we get the information about the website. So that way, if listeners want to comment and let their feelings be known about education, what works, what doesn't, what you'd like to see, you can do that as part of this education tour taken on by the House Appropriations Committee and the House Education Committee. Thanks a lot for sharing the time with us.
And sugar belongs on grits.
No, it does not.
All right, we would like to thank Representative Harris for being with us, despite his odd culinary preferences. And before, so what we're going to do now is actually we're going to speak to Vanessa Maria Graber. Vanessa, you've been following one of the most troubling cases we've seen in a while here in the city. So what have you seen, and what can you tell us about what's happening? And I think you're muted there, Vanessa.
Sorry about that. So for the last 2 months or so, I've been covering the case of Eddie Irizarry, and he is a young Puerto Rican man from Kensington who was shot and killed by police officer Mark Dial. Now, police, allege that Eddie, who was suffering from, he was struggling with schizophrenia, was driving erratically through the streets of North Philly. And that's what originally caught their attention. Now, we're not sure if that's really true, but that's at least what they reported initially. Eddie then turned the wrong way down a one-way street on Willard Street. He was driving slow, and then he parked his car. Officer Mark Dial and his partner then pulled up right behind Eddie Irizarry, and immediately, within 5 seconds of exiting the vehicle, Mark Dial shot into Eddie Irizarry's car. Now, initially, police had reported, and this is coming from the Philadelphia Police Department and the, Commissioner Daniel Outlaw, who has recently resigned. They initially reported to the press and to the family that Eddie Irizarry had exited his vehicle and had lunged at the police officers with a knife and tried to go for their gun, and they feared for their life. Unfortunately, that story was completely fabricated by Mark Dial's partner, who is unnamed in this whole story. We still don't know the name of that police officer. What followed that initial report was an investigation by the family's attorney, who's being represented by Shaka Johnson. The attorney and his associates went to Willard Street, knocked on the doors of the neighbors' homes, and were able to find video surveillance footage from two of the homes on that street that clearly showed what happened that day. And what they found shocked everybody. They saw that Eddie Irizarry, in fact, never left his vehicle, had his windows up in his car, and was only parked there for a few seconds before Mark Dial shot into the vehicle and ultimately murdered him. That launched a very explosive investigation by the district attorney's office and later by internal affairs within the police department. And once that footage became public, the press and residents were outraged, and they wanted to understand why the police had initially fabricated that story and circulated that misinformation to the public and to the family. And why did Officer Mark Dial exit his car with guns blazing and within 5 seconds shoot into the vehicle? Now, Mark Dial and his attorneys claim that Eddie Irizarry was holding a knife. That's not entirely clear from some of the video footage. They claim to have found a knife in the vehicle, but if the car is parked and the windows are up, one has to question what was the real threat there. That story has since changed again. Now the defense attorneys are saying that Mark Dial thought he saw a gun due to a glare in the windshield. But regardless, I think a lot of the public and the community, and especially his family, say that Eddie Irizarry did not pose any threat to the police officers that day. In fact, he never had any incidences with police. He had no criminal record. And if he was driving erratically, I think the family has been asking, why wasn't he pulled over in a regular traffic stop as opposed to just being shot and killed so quickly? So that is essentially what we know right now. As a result, the district attorney's office had a press conference about 2 weeks ago where they announced that they would be pursuing a number of charges against Officer Dial. He is being charged with first-degree murder. He is also being charged with voluntary manslaughter, aggravated assault, simple assault, recklessly endangering another person, official oppression, and possession of an instrument of a crime. Mark Dial was also suspended with the intent to dismiss, but not for the killing of Eddie Irizarry. He was actually being suspended with intent to dismiss for not cooperating with the investigation and not answering the questions of internal affairs. So yesterday, Mark Dial appeared in court for a bail hearing because he was actually released on bail, which is very uncommon and outraged the family. The bail was originally set at $500,000, and the FOP union, which is funding Mark Dial's defense, posted the $50,000 necessary to get Dial released. And so the prosecution has been fighting that because they felt as though the judge had done something very unusual in allowing Mark Dial to have bail and be set free. And they argued that the bail magistrate's decision to grant Dial bail when he was charged with first-degree murder was actually inconsistent with the Pennsylvania Constitution. And so normally when a defendant is being charged with a crime that carries a potential life sentence, or they are a flight risk, they are not given bail. So in yesterday's hearing, he was remanded back to jail, and that bail was revoked. And the family and the attorneys representing the family were very happy about that. On September 26, Mark Dial will return to court for a preliminary hearing, and we'll hear more of the evidence that the DA's office has against Mark Dial by pursuing these charges. During the press conference where they shared the body camera footage, we got to see a lot more than what we originally saw in the surveillance video captured by the two homes on Willard Street. Now, the footage is really graphic, so we're not going to show it here. But we do see that within 6 seconds, again, Mark Dial and his partner, they parked the car, they exit the vehicles with their guns drawn, which again, we're not sure why they drew their guns when they didn't even know what was happening in the vehicle at that point. And then they had said some things to Irizarry, but he did not speak English. He came from Puerto Rico 7 years ago, and he had not yet learned English, although he did understand some things. They say they observed him holding a knife. You can hear some of that on the body camera footage. And then two things that we got to see that was not on the other video is we saw Mark Dial drag Eddie Irizarry out of the vehicle and did not render him any aid whatsoever. He did not try to stop the bleeding. He did not try to give him CPR. In fact, he dragged him onto the street, from the street, and threw him into the back of his police cruiser and then rushed off to the hospital. So that was something we had not seen, and it opens a lot of questions about why Officer Dial did not render aid to the victim. And then the second thing we see is the aftermath of that, and his unnamed partner very quickly after the shooting occurred, telling police officials who were in white shirts that Eddie Irizarry had left his vehicle and had lunged at them and pointed the knife at them. And so that was really shocking. I watched the live stream. I wasn't actually at the press conference, but the DA's office streamed it live. And as we watched on the live stream, a lot of people were outraged and commenting like, wow, this is the point where the story is fabricated. And it's interesting because initially when the first footage was released and Danielle Outlaw had a press conference, a reporter had asked where that story came from and why the PPD had shared that initially. And she had replied that that was still under investigation and that it was misinformation and that they should have verified that information before they shared it with the public. Now, seeing that video, it's very clear where that story came from. It came immediately, like within minutes of the shooting happening, from the partner. And so it is a bit disingenuous for Danielle Outlaw to say that it was under investigation when at that point, everybody knew that that story had originated from the police officer. involved, and that he is the one who fabricated that story. And I bring that up because the family is also calling for that police officer to be indicted on charges because they feel that that is an accessory to murder or an attempt to cover up what happened. And obviously that wasn't investigated at all before that story was circulated to the public. And so this causes a lot of distrust between people in the 25th district, which, is in Kensington, and the police that are, supposed to be keeping them safe. And so we're looking for other evidence in this preliminary hearing to see what the district attorney has in order to take the case to trial. And so at this point, the community has still been organizing. There's been a series of community meetings and vigils in order to continue this movement around police accountability for Eddie Irizarry and his family.
Hey, Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us and walking us through that and telling us where we are right now. This is very important, and it's something that we're going to need more updates about as time goes on.
And I have a question. I actually have a question. The partner are there plans? Do you know if there are any plans to indict him as well? Because he's basically, an accessory before the fact.
Yeah, during the district attorney's press conference where they announced the charges against Mark Dial and their, intention to take the case to trial, and where they released the body camera footage, there were a lot of questions of who else is involved in this case. Now, the family of Eddie Irizarry and the lawyer have been very clear that they want all officers that are involved with the death and the cover-up to be investigated and to be charged. They're also calling for an independent investigation that is separate from police internal affairs. Now, the FOP police union is rigorously defending Mark Dial and saying that the body camera footage shows that they feared for their life and that the shooting was justified. And so we're not sure right now what the DA's office is planning on doing, given that those comments during the press conference, from the partner were released to the public. I don't think any of us expected us to see that lie being told when the footage was released. Like, we knew the footage was going to be graphic and it was going to show the actual moment that led to his death. But that second part where that whopper of a lie was told was a shock to everybody. So there is a lot of pressure mounting from the community and the family to release the name of that police officer, because we don't even know who that person is, what their background is. And if you recall, when District Attorney Krasner first took office, he had a very controversial list of police officers that were on a do not call list, and because they had a history of lying and covering up crimes. And so I think people want to know, is this an officer that's on that list? Does he have a history of lying and, sharing misinformation? We just don't know who this person is and what their background is, and if they've been involved in any other cases like this. So we'll have to wait and see. I do think the district attorney is under a lot of pressure to make some kind of announcement soon. And so we'll be following that case to see if the officer is identified and if more charges are to come.
Okay.
One thing
right,
I want to
Vanessa,
clarify
thank
is
you
just
very
like,
much.
sure, just one thing I want to clarify is that Danielle Outlaw announced her resignation right around the same time, that this body camera footage was released. And a lot of people are attributing this case to her resignation. And I think it's important to point out that she's actually leaving Philadelphia to take another job with the New York and New Jersey Port Authority, and that's been a months-long process of interviewing and looking for another job, and that typically when a new mayor comes on, a new police commissioner is appointed. So with Kenny's departure, it was expected that she would leave too. So I think that she was going to leave anyway, regardless of this case. But the timing of that announcement might have coincided with all the pressure and bad press building around this 25th district that was caught covering up this crime. And so I think it's a question for, Sherelle Parker and David O moving forward in terms of the new police commissioner and how they will handle these types of incidences and continuing to repair the damage and build trust with communities impacted with crimes like these. Anyway, we'll keep following the case and providing you updates. We'll certainly learn more from the preliminary hearing next week. And when I learn more, I will definitely be sure to report back to Hall Monitor.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Vanessa. And we'll definitely be keeping an eye on it because it's an important issue. And the thing is, it's turning into a nationwide issue. I just recently did a story for BET on the Louisiana race. And one of the top issues in that is police brutality and whether or not the police are going too far at times. So thank you for bringing this to us, and we'll definitely keep up with it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, and we'll definitely keep you posted as the story progresses.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. And next up, we have the head of the transport riders union talking about the SEPTA bus revolution. If you look at today's Philadelphia Inquirer, the front page gives you, or the front page at least online, gives you the opportunity to plug in your address and see what's going to happen in terms of bus and whether or not your bus is going to get cut off or what's going to happen with it. So we interviewed the head of the Transport Riders Union, and here is the interview.
All right, Marcus McKnight, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
So before we get into the bus revolution, can you tell us a little bit about the Philadelphia Transit Riders Union?
Okay, so the Philadelphia Transit Riders Union is a small democratic organization. It's democratic with a lowercase d. We are transit riders, transit workers, transit advocates who are just coming together to work towards a common goal, which is improving public transit for everyone in our region.
Now, before the whole bus revolution thing started, what had you been hearing about bus service in Philadelphia?
Well, we've heard we have heard various things, but a lot of people just want more bus service that runs later, that gets them where they got to go, more frequent service.
Now, then what happens is, everything's going status quo, and SEPTA announces, okay, we're going to have this bus revolution. What was your group's initial reaction to hearing that?
So our group's initial reaction to hearing the bus revolution was like, okay, this is a new plan by SEPTA to help improve bus service. This is something that riders, advocates, a lot of people have been asking for a very long time. Let's look at this and see how this is going to go.
And now that we've seen at least what the plans are, how does the Transit Riders Union feel about that?
Well, this is a mixed bag. Depending on what part of the region you're in, will determine how you feel about the bus revolution. And the same goes for the Philly TRU. Collectively, we're like, okay, a lot of people are going to be frustrated. There are some pros and there are a lot of cons. And we'll have to sit here and individually go through each plan and see, all right, this works. This might work for this group of people, but this might not work for this group of people. So we're just getting a feeling of how people feel about it. And some people have said a few positive things, but there are dozens and dozens of complaints as we've seen over the past week or so.
And one of the things I keep coming back to, because this plan was released a couple of weeks ago, an hour before we went on the air, so we didn't have time to study it that week. So we came back the following week to talk about it. What I noticed is, there's about 150 bus routes. Most of them are changing, like 90% of them, I think. And if you look at your bus route, I take the 42 a lot, and I look at it and think, oh, okay, it's changing. What do I take in its place? Are people coming to you with that kind of question? Say, well, what do we do now? And what kind of advice are you giving them?
Okay, so me personally, I haven't received any questions about that yet.
Okay.
I strongly believe that there are still a lot of people who are truly unaware of what's going on. You can have advertisements, you can have a wrap on a bus, or something on Twitter or on the SEPTA website. You can have those different things, but you also have to actually go out and talk to riders. You have to meet riders where they are. You can't say, "Oh, we're going to do a pop-up at like Broad Island or in Derby or at this random train station or bus." Like, that's great, but that your riders ride more than just at these different locations that buses might take a break at. Riders might go through a transit center, but you're still not reaching the riders that are in the neighborhoods that are going to different places. You got to go out to everywhere. And I strongly believe that the outreach could have been a lot better.
And that's one of the criticisms we've been hearing from a lot of different places. What have you thought about the meetings and the events that SEPTA has held so far? Do you feel that they've been useful? Do you think they could be better?
So I got a chance to watch the YouTube clip that you guys created for the last SEPTA hearing. And just for the 5 or 6 minutes of that clip, I was thoroughly disappointed. So the first thing is, when riders have questions or concerns about anything regarding changes to a bus line, there should be somebody that's there that's able to answer the question. And if you don't have somebody to answer the question, you can say something along the lines of, "I don't have that answer right now. I will work on it and get an answer for you by this time." And you should be able to be committed to getting them an answer within a certain amount of time that's reasonable, so folks can, calm their fears. Um, the one person was mentioned something along the lines of, "You guys haven't done anything over the past 10 or so years, and you guys should be ashamed of yourself." And that's actually correct. Public transit should be fluid. It should be constantly changing. Okay. If something works, don't mess with success. But if something needs to change, it needs to change. You need to constantly look at the transit lines and go, okay, this is working, this is not, so on and so forth. And even without the bus revolution, there have been issues I've noticed personally that is like, okay, this needs to change, but it's not changing. It's just a status quo. And it might be just something as simple as changing the time that a bus runs. So like, I know, for example, the one like transit example I could think of is like, on a bus schedule, you have time points, different geographical points on a map in which, that's what time that bus comes to that certain stop. And I think if I remember correctly, it's like the 57 bus in the evenings, they give you like 5 minutes to go from Market Street to Washington Avenue. And it's like, okay, that's a good 10 blocks or so. There's people out there, there's traffic lights, there's no way you can make that. And then I looked at an old 57 schedule from like 15, 20 years ago, and there was still 5 minutes. It's like, wait a minute. You've been doing this for over a decade of this 5 minute running time between these 2 points at this certain time of day. Like, maybe you should think about increasing the time so the driver can get to those time points on time and still be able to pick up and drop people off state without having to rush or be stressed out.
Does it concern you that SEPTA is proposing so many changes at one time that maybe it'd be better if it was more gradual, or do you think that this makes more sense based on what we know?
Definitely it has to be gradual. Okay. You can't do a whole system change at one time because you only have so many staff members. You have a lot more people than you have staff members. how are you going to stretch your staff, the folks in the office, to be able to go out and talk to the different riders about the revolution? You know, what's changing, what's not changing. You just can't put up signs or pamphlets and say good luck. And you definitely can't get the bus operators to do it because they already got enough to do.
Yeah, right.
They have a lot to do already. Don't make their jobs so complicated by them being the frontline people have to explain these changes because they might know the changes at their garage, but if it's an intersecting route that they don't operate, they're not going to know what the changes are. They might hear of it, but they might know the intricate details. So you got to be out there, and you have thousands of riders, and you have hundreds of languages spoken in this city, and you're going to have to make somehow, some way, be able to explain all that to these different people. And the other thing that's not being discussed is, if I remember correctly, there's a low literacy rate in Philadelphia. I think it's 67%. I know it's about 60% of folks that are low literate. And then I think of the article said like 40% of those people are illiterate, period. They can't, read their doctor's prescriptions. They can't help their kids with homework. They can't file a job application because they're not literate. How are you going to reach those riders? It's like, that's a really big issue that no one's really discussing. How are we going to reach riders who speak different languages, who might have disabilities might be aware about, and who don't have the literacy or comprehension skills to be able to comprehend all these changes at one time? Because, I'm a bus operator. I'm also a college student, and it's like even I have to slow down and read something 2 or 3 times and go, okay, and now I understand what you're trying to say.
Mm-hmm. And I certainly want my bus driver focused on driving the bus rather than having to explain things. That's their job. That's, and I think most people feel that way, that it's not the bus drivers who should be doing this or the other transit workers. There should be more of an outreach from like the home office on this. And that's one of the things we've been hearing on. So for the Transit Riders Union organization, what kinds of, are you planning any advocacy, any outreach events, anything like that to help people understand what's happening?
We're going to do the best that we can to reach out to riders. We were working on website updates. We were working on different types of outreach to help riders understand what's going to change. But we really can't. We can do the best we can, but we really can't go out there and be like, all right, this is what's happening until we get, the final set of changes that are going to happen. Because I can't say, oh, bus line so-and-so is going to do this, and then, in a month, stuff is like, oh, we're changing this. Like, oh, wait, I got to go back and do it all over again.
Right. Because this is not the, at least as we've been hearing, this is not the final set of changes. This is a proposal, and then it will be official maybe in January, in the new year sometime, 2024. That's kind of at least what we've been hearing. Is that what you've been hearing?
So that's what I heard. Just like looking at the website and like listening to the hearings, like, the final proposals or recommendations will be at some point next year.
And if people are nervous about their bus routes changing, what recommendation would you make right now to people just to make them feel a little better about it?
Well, the first thing I always say is just take a deep breath and relax. It's going to be okay. No matter what happens, it's going to be okay. We can always come up with a game plan. There's always a plan B. And then the next thing will be to, just, look at the website, and just read over things, see if you can attend a public hearing or just reach out to the Philly TRU. We can sit there, we'll come to you and sit down and explain to you what's going on, what's changing about your bus line, what questions and concerns that you have. And we might be able to, we will be able to, not might, we will be able to work with you and help you come up with a game plan. That's what we're here for, to advocate for, your needs, to help you improve the quality of your transit ride. That's the most important thing.
Well, as a small volunteer group, how hard is that for you to start to manage that kind of thing? Because the entire group's volunteers, if I'm not mistaken.
That's true.
And so how does a group like that say, okay, we're taking this on. We're going to try to make this work. And secondly, should that fall to you? That's one of the things I always think about.
All right. So the first thing is I think it was Margaret Mead who said, never doubt that a small group of concerned citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So we kind of follow that philosophy. We're a small group. We got our work cut out for us, but it has to get done. And no, we shouldn't have to do this, but we're going to have to do what we're going to have to do to help people. Because come the end of the day, if nobody rides the bus, then a lot of things aren't going to exist anymore because they're not going to be needed. We're going to need people to ride the bus. We'll always have to advocate for people's changes and, talk with riders and so on and so forth to understand what they need. So, we're going to have to do what we're going to have to do. I would rather be getting paid to do this, but if that means on my day off from driving a bus, I got to do this, I got to do it.
Right.
And a lot of my fellow organization members feel the same way. We all come from various different backgrounds, various different industries. Like, if we got to take a day off to go out and go to 10 different places and talk to dozens of riders each place, and so be it. 2 hours here, 2 hours there. This is what we're here for.
Yeah, it makes a difference. I'd like to bring in Denise Clay Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Thank you for joining us, Marcus. I guess my question for you is, everybody has talked about the buses, and yes, those are important, but you also have subway riders and L riders and regional rail riders. This is, the bus revolution is going to affect us because there's going to be more people on these particular modes of transportation, and not all of them are cut out for everybody. There are still some stations that aren't handicapped accessible, and then there's the fact that most of the ones that are handicapped accessible or where you can use them if you have a disability, the elevators are, to be kind, disgusting. Has the union approached any of SEPTA with any of those concerns? Because there's going to be more people using those or being forced to use those if we get rid of the buses.
So from our point of view, we haven't received a lot of complaints about that yet. So, I would ideally hope, and this should go without saying, but I ideally hope that SEPTA is proactive, and if they get a complaint about something being dirty or unsanitary or whatever, that they work diligently to make sure that it's clean, up to par, up to standards. Hopefully, I'm not there. I don't know, but hopefully, they work diligently towards that. So it's like, if you don't have a clean and safe system, you're not going to attract riders, and then folks is going to find another way. They might have to go deeper into their pockets to go into a little bit more debt to grab a car, pay for that Uber, because they don't have to deal with the uncleanliness or unsanitary conditions. And nobody should be forced to do that either.
Okay. Now, SEPTA has already said that despite the fact that there aren't enough bus drivers and aren't enough personnel right now, that if they don't get money from the Commonwealth or from the federal government after the American Rescue Plan money has been spent, that they're going to have to do a doomsday plan where they really cut service and they, raise fees. That's got to be something that you're, hearing something about from riders. And I guess, what can we do as, riders and as citizens to kind of make our state reps and state legislators a little bit more attuned to this, so that maybe SEPTA can get some money that will keep that from happening?
Okay. So fun fact, SEPTA always has done doomsday plans in the past. I remember being in middle school, being in high school, and the running joke was, it's the annual SEPTA is going out of business sale, because this is just something that has been on repeat.
So much for taking the time to talk to us. That was Marcus from the Transport Riders Union, And we'd like to thank him and State Rep Jordan Harris for joining us on Hall Monitor this week. For myself and my co-host Larry McGlynn and Lance Haver, have a good week. And also stay tuned next week. Catherine Gilmore Richardson, City Council member, will be with us. Thanks. Have a good night.